think of aviation, we often imagine a smooth flight, arriving at our destination safely. However, history has shown us that some flights ended in tragedy, leaving a profound impact on the families of the victims, the aviation industry, and the entire world. Some of these accidents shook the US to its core. In this video, we will dive into some of the most devastating plane crashes in US history that left an indelible mark. Let's start with one of the most famous and tragic incidents, Turkish Airlines Flight 981. It was an event that not only caused a great loss of life, but also changed the future of aviation safety. On March 3, 1974, Turkish Airlines Flight 981 was on its way from Paris to London, with a stopover in Paris, carrying 335 passengers and 11 crew members. It was a regular scheduled flight, but what happened next would turn it into one of the deadliest aviation disasters in history. Just minutes after takeoff, disaster struck. The plane's cargo door, located at the rear of the aircraft, suddenly failed. This wasn't just a small malfunction, this was catastrophic. The pressure difference between the cargo hold and the passenger cabin caused a violent decompression, ripping apart part of the cabin floor. This triggered a series of deadly events. Can you imagine the chaos? One moment, everything is normal, and in the blink of an eye, you're in the midst of a catastrophe that would lead to the loss of 346 lives. It's hard to even begin to wrap your mind around it. So, what caused this disaster? The aircraft involved was a McDonnell Douglas DC-10, and it had a fatal flaw. The cargo doors, designed to open outward, were highly susceptible to being forced open at high altitudes due to the pressure difference. The design should have prevented this, but it failed. The latching system of the cargo door, which was supposed to lock shut under pressure, had a critical design flaw. Even when not properly latched, the doors could be closed, leading to an unsecured cargo hold. There were even warnings about this design flaw, but they were ignored. Can you believe that? It's like having a car with a faulty brake system, getting warned about it, but choosing not to fix it. That's what happened here, and it had deadly consequences. When the cargo door on Turkish Airlines Flight 981 failed, the situation became catastrophic almost instantly. The door's failure caused an explosive decompression, which led to a massive shift in pressure between the cargo hold and the passenger cabin. This pressure difference was so intense that it ripped away a large section of the cabin floor directly above the cargo hold. 6 passengers, who were seated in the area directly affected, were torn out of the plane along with the floor. This was just the beginning of the deadly chain of events that unfolded in the following seconds. After the floor ruptured, the plane's control systems were severely damaged. The explosive decompression caused critical control cables that connected to the plane's elevators, rudder, and engine systems to snap. These control cables were essential for managing the aircraft's flight path and speed. Without them, the pilots were left with no way to stabilize the plane, which began to fall into an uncontrollable descent. The plane's speed increased rapidly as it fell, and the pilots struggled desperately to regain control, but their efforts were in vain. The damage was too severe, and they were unable to counter the force that was pulling the aircraft down. Within just 77 seconds of the initial decompression, the plane had descended from its cruising altitude of around 23,000 feet to its final crash site in Ermenonville Forest. The aircraft was traveling at an extremely high speed of over 780 kilometers per hour when it struck the trees. This speed was far beyond what the plane was designed to withstand, and the force of the crash was so intense that the aircraft disintegrated upon impact. The wreckage was scattered across a large area, making recovery efforts extremely difficult. The violent nature of the crash left very little recognizable wreckage. Of the 346 people on board, only 188 victims could be identified through DNA testing. This was because the intensity of the crash caused such severe fragmentation that traditional methods of identification, such as visual identification or fingerprints, were not possible. The remains of the passengers and crew were so scattered that investigators had to collect thousands of body fragments from the crash site. The process of identifying victims through DNA was a painstaking task that highlighted the brutal severity of the disaster. The crash also left a lasting impact on aviation safety procedures. It was a stark reminder of how quickly a situation can spiral out of control when key systems fail. The speed and intensity of the crash, combined with the total loss of control, emphasized the importance of designing aircraft with redundant safety features and ensuring that safety procedures are in place to prevent such catastrophic failures. The final moments of Flight 981 were not just a tragedy for the families of those aboard, but also a wake-up call for the aviation industry, leading to significant changes in safety regulations and aircraft design to prevent similar disasters in the future. What makes this disaster even worse is that it was entirely preventable. A similar incident occurred just 2 years earlier with American Airlines Flight 96. The same problem with the cargo doors occurred, but that time, the plane managed to land safely. Investigations from that earlier incident revealed the same exact flaw, yet nothing substantial was done to fix it. There was even a memo from a Convair engineer predicting exactly what would happen if the flaw wasn't addressed. Tragically, this memo was ignored, and Flight 981 became the outcome. The crash of Turkish Airlines. Flight 981 in 1974 had a profound and lasting impact on aviation safety. The tragedy was caused by a series of preventable design flaws, most notably the failure of the plane's cargo door. In the wake of the disaster, there was an immediate and intense push to make sure such an event would never happen again. The aviation world learned a harsh lesson, and as a result, significant changes were made to how commercial aircraft were designed and how safety regulations were enforced. One of the key outcomes of the investigation into the crash was the complete redesign of cargo door systems on commercial aircraft. The failure of the DC-10's cargo door, which was designed to open outward, was a critical flaw. At high altitudes, the pressure differential between the pressurized cabin and the cargo hold made these outward opening doors vulnerable to failure. The failure of the door caused explosive decompression, which led to the loss of control and the crash. In response, new designs were developed for cargo doors, with improved locking mechanisms to ensure that doors would stay securely closed, even under the extreme pressures experienced at high altitudes. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, took immediate action following the crash. They implemented stricter regulations that required cargo doors on pressurized aircraft to undergo more rigorous testing. These tests ensured that doors could withstand the extreme pressure differences that occur at cruising altitudes. The FAA also revised its oversight procedures to include more frequent inspections and checks on cargo door systems, as well as more thorough maintenance standards. Airlines and manufacturers were now required to ensure that cargo doors were properly sealed before every flight and that safety features were not overlooked during design or maintenance. In addition to changes in cargo door design, the crash led to broader reforms in how aircraft systems were certified and inspected. The crash of Flight 981 highlighted the fact that manufacturers and regulatory bodies were sometimes too focused on production schedules and cost-saving measures, allowing potential safety hazards to be ignored or underplayed. The tragedy pushed for a cultural shift within the aviation industry, where safety was placed above all other concerns. This shift led to more comprehensive training for maintenance crews, better communication between airlines and manufacturers, and a focus on ensuring that all potential safety risks were addressed before they could cause harm. The changes in aviation safety after the Flight 981 disaster were not just limited to cargo door systems. The crash led to the creation of new, more stringent safety protocols for all aspects of aircraft design. New regulations were introduced that required airlines to equip their planes with additional safety systems, such as more effective warning lights and alarms for malfunctioning components, and more reliable backup systems in case of failure. These improvements significantly reduced the likelihood of similar disasters occurring, making air travel safer for everyone. In the years following the disaster, the aviation industry began to view safety from a broader perspective. The lessons learned from the Turkish Airlines Flight 981 crash emphasized the importance of anticipating and addressing safety risks before they turned into tragedies. The crash became a turning point in aviation history, sparking reforms that improved the reliability of aircraft systems and strengthened the overall safety culture in the aviation industry. The improvements made after this disaster helped prevent future catastrophes, ultimately saving countless lives. Many well-known figures in aviation and safety circles shared their reactions and thoughts on the tragic event. One of the most notable voices came from aviation experts and engineers, who highlighted the preventable nature of the crash. For example, Aviation consultant Dr. John Nance, who had deep insights into aircraft safety, emphasized how the cargo door's design flaws were already well known but had not been properly addressed by manufacturers. His comments underscored the fact that the disaster was not a random accident, but rather the result of systemic failures in both engineering and regulatory oversight. The crash also caught the attention of safety advocates, who used it as a catalyst to push for stronger safety measures across the aviation industry. Elizabeth McQueen, a prominent aviation safety advocate at the time, stated that the accident exposed critical gaps in the safety protocols regarding cargo hold doors. She urged airlines and regulatory bodies to do more than just react to accidents after they occurred, but to proactively address known risks, making it clear that changes were needed to prevent future tragedies. Industry leaders, including the heads of major airline companies, expressed their shock and sorrow over the loss of life. However, their reactions often included a call for improvements in design and operational procedures to enhance safety in commercial aviation. The president of McDonnell Douglas, the company responsible for the DC-10, stated that the company would review and overhaul the cargo door system in light of the disaster. He promised to cooperate with the authorities and make the necessary changes to ensure such an incident never happened again. Additionally, aviation historians and experts remarked that the crash would serve as an important learning tool for future generations of engineers and pilots. They pointed out that despite the tragedy, the lessons learned from Flight 981 led to a significant shift in how aviation safety was approached. The crash sparked changes in the way aviation systems were certified and tested, ensuring that such preventable mistakes would not be overlooked in the future. The loss of 346 lives was not just a tragedy. It was a personal loss for hundreds of families. The aftermath also saw many legal battles, with families fighting for justice for their loved ones. There were also civil lawsuits, accusing the manufacturers of negligence in not fixing the cargo door flaw. This wasn't just a moment of grief for the families, but also for the aviation industry. It exposed how economic pressures could lead to negligence and how safety could sometimes take a back seat to production schedules. It's heartbreaking to think about the families who never got to say goodbye, who didn't know their loved ones were in danger until it was too late. The tragedy was something that changed aviation forever, ensuring that future aircraft would have better safeguards in place. Even though Turkish Airlines Flight 981 happened over 4 decades ago, its legacy is still present in aviation today. The lessons learned from this disaster continue to shape the way aircraft are designed, tested, and operated. No more cargo doors that can be easily forced open, no more ignoring critical safety warnings. And the question remains, could it have been prevented? Absolutely. But it wasn't, and that's what makes it so tragic. So, how do we make sure something like this doesn't happen again? By learning from the past, improving our technology, and holding people accountable for their mistakes. That's how we ensure the lives lost in tragedies like Flight 981 were not lost in vain. What could have been done differently? Reflecting on this, one wonders, if the warnings had been taken seriously, could the disaster have been avoided? Aviation, like many industries, is all about risk management. When you identify a potential risk, you need to address it before it escalates into something catastrophic. This was a clear case of failure to act on known risks, and that failure resulted in a disaster that changed the world. Is it possible that we, as a society, sometimes ignore warnings that are right in front of us? The aviation industry isn't the only one that faces this issue. How often do we hear about potential problems being dismissed until it's too late? It's a tough question, but it's something we need to think about. Turkish Airlines Flight 981 was a heartbreaking disaster that left a permanent mark on the aviation world. The lives lost that day should never be forgotten, and the lessons learned from the crash have helped make flying safer for everyone. This was a tragedy that shouldn't have happened, but because it did, the aviation industry was forced to change. As we reflect on this event, let's remember that safety always comes first. Whether it's in aviation or any other field, we must never ignore the warnings, the flaws, or the risks. We must always strive to do better for the sake of those who depend on us. The loss of 346 lives changed the course of aviation history, and it serves as a reminder that, no matter how safe we think we are, there's always room for improvement. What do you think? Do you think we've learned enough from history to prevent future tragedies, or is there still more work to be done? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel.